To avoid coming across as arrogant, I should mention that my best friend, Ricardo, and I were only 19 years old at the time. We both came from wealthy households in the north and enjoyed our Jersey Shore getaways with families from New Jersey. On a weeknight, Ricardo was driving the two of us to Lavallette from my house in Belmar, New Jersey. If we weren't looking for a party, we could enjoy some drinks on the way to Ricardo's apartment, as Lavallette had a vibe that suited people our age. The trip took about an hour, and I must admit, I enjoyed spending time there. Not only because it was a little nicer than the rest of the shore, but also because there was plenty to do. However, for the sake of conciseness, I'll get right to the point. That night, we decided to forego the usual partying and other activities in favor of a more low-key evening. Instead, we planned to roll a joint, have a few beers, and visit one of the many private beaches. To be honest, the idea of being under the stars sounded fantastic. We had been having a great time partying with some of our other friends, so we needed a break. For those unfamiliar with Lavallette's layout, there are two main areas, beachside and bayside. After having a few drinks at Ricardo's apartment, we picked up 3 bikes from his garage and rode toward the shore. Once we arrived, we hid the bikes under some shrubs and lit our joints. The only sounds were the gentle waves rolling onto the beach and the accompanying breeze. The shoreline stretched endlessly in both directions, and the sand felt cold underfoot. As we relaxed on the beach, listening to a sky full of stars, we gradually became more inebriated, filling the air with laughter and conversation. That's when we heard it. At first, it was barely noticeable, a faint metallic humming, reminiscent of the bright overhead lights in a massive gymnasium. The sound had no apparent source, and I can't quite explain it. I sat up and looked at Ricardo, and as soon as he began to hear it too, we both snapped our heads around, searching the darkness for the origin of the noise. Oddly, it was impossible to pinpoint. The beach was so dark that we couldn't be seen, and the crashing waves masked any sounds we made. I know it doesn't sound terrifying, but my heart was pounding in my chest. The droning persisted for a few more minutes before Ricardo motioned for me to follow him. I nodded in agreement and turned to leave. Although the sound was still faint, we were starting to get genuinely scared. As soon as we stood up, the droning intensified from a barely audible hum to a much louder, almost menacing sound. I had to stop myself from yelling out, fearing that making noise might be a mistake. It felt like something straight out of a horror movie. Instinctively, we headed toward the sand dunes, convinced that the sound was coming from dangerously close by. But in reality, we had no idea what we were doing. We kept scanning the darkness, but we couldn't see anything. The noise, however, grew louder and was definitely coming from our right. A chill ran down my spine, and every hair on my body stood on end. I knew something was terribly wrong. We weren't just running anymore, we were fleeing. Then, just as we neared the dunes, Ricardo suddenly grabbed my shoulder, stopping me in my tracks. At first, I couldn't tell what he was staring at, but when I followed his gaze, I saw it. A tall, dark figure standing motionless at the top of the dune. Its arms were unnaturally long, nearly reaching its knees, and it was ridiculously tall. How it remained so still was beyond me. It was absolutely terrifying. I looked away just as Ricardo yelled at me. Without hesitation, we turned and ran. As we sprinted toward the second dune entrance, moving parallel to the beach, I could still clearly recall the horrifying sight behind us. When we reached the top and looked back at where we had just been, we saw them. 3 or 4 other figures standing motionless on the slope, all seemingly facing us. The original figure remained at the top of the dune. We didn't waste another second. We ran all the way home, abandoning our bikes in the process. When we returned the next morning to retrieve them, they were gone. Either someone had stolen them, or something had been following us that night. To this day, I have never experienced anything more terrifying on a beach. I still don't understand what happened. And the strangest part is that I have never heard that eerie droning sound again. For days after that night, Ricardo and I barely spoke about what had happened. It wasn't just fear that silenced us. It was something else, something deeper. A gnawing sense of unease, an unshakable paranoia that settled in our bones. I couldn't stop thinking about the figures. The way they stood so unnaturally still. The way they seemed to be watching us. But what haunted me the most was the sound. That low, metallic hum had felt almost intelligent. Like it wasn't just noise, but something deliberate, something alive. The following weekend, Ricardo called me. His voice was different, shaky, hesitant. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Meet me at the boardwalk." When I arrived, he was already there, pacing near the railing, his hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets. His face was pale, his eyes darting around like he was afraid we were being watched. "I went back," he admitted, barely above a whisper. A cold shiver ran down my spine. "What? Are you insane?" He shook his head. "I had to. I needed to know. And I saw something." I swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" Ricardo hesitated before pulling out his phone. He tapped the screen a few times, then handed it to me. "This. I recorded it." My fingers trembled as I took the phone. The video was dark, nearly pitch black, but as I adjusted the brightness, my stomach twisted into knots. There, standing on the same dune where we had first seen it, was the figure. The same unnaturally tall, motionless shape, its long arms hanging at its sides. But this time, it wasn't alone. Behind it, deeper in the darkness, were more figures, dozens of them. And then the sound started. That same metallic hum, growing louder, more insistent. But this time, there was something new. Something I hadn't heard before. A whisper. Faint, layered voices, speaking in a language I didn't understand. But it wasn't the words that terrified me. It was the way they spoke in unison, as if they were all part of the same mind. The video ended abruptly as the screen shook violently. Ricardo must have run. I looked up at him, my breath shallow. "We need to go to the police." Ricardo's expression darkened. "No, we can't. You don't understand." When I ran back to my apartment, I wasn't alone. A chill wrapped around my spine like a vice. "What do you mean?" He exhaled sharply. I felt it. The presence. Like someone was watching me, following me. But whenever I turned around, nothing. I glanced around us, suddenly hyper-aware of every shadow on the boardwalk. "Ricardo, you're scaring me." "Good," he whispered. "Because I'm scared too." Neither of us spoke for a long moment. The wind howled through the wooden planks beneath our feet, sending a shudder through my body. Then Ricardo's phone buzzed in his pocket. When he pulled it out, his face went white. "What?" I asked, my voice barely more than a breath. He turned the screen toward me. It was a text message. An unknown number. No words, just a single image. A dark figure, standing outside Ricardo's apartment. The metallic hum filled my ears once more. Only this time, it wasn't coming from the phone. It was behind us.